This is Christina Eames doing a reflection of the Module 3 readings, the blog posts related to what teachers want, as well as the text reading on digital age learning culture. I found it interesting that despite the blog posts being several years old, they were still perfectly relevant to the issues that teachers are having today. It's disheartening since so many teachers are voicing what they want and what they need in order to be effective educators, but nothing is really changing, at least not for the better. So I wonder then, are leaders just not listening? Are they not caring? Is it beyond their control? Advocating for their teachers should be the role of administrators, at least one of the top roles, but maybe they're just wearing too many hats to be able to do their job effectively. Frustrated Teachers blog made a suggestion of dividing the role of principal between an MBA position that handles the business and finance aspect, as well as an MSA position that handles the educational piece. I found that to be an interesting and worthy of consideration suggestion, because the business side must be run, and it must be run at the school level, because each school has their budget and makes decisions on how the money is spent and what happens at the business level. But I think the most important piece of it, educational puzzle, is the educational aspect, the students. And if a principal is spending all or even most of their time with their heads in the finance side, then how are they improving the quality of education at their school? Brian Crosby, in part 1 of the blog post, I think best summarizes the desires that the other blog contributors mentioned in what teachers want, the most important being trust. Trust is huge. Trust is the one thing that teachers really are asking for the most for their classroom, because the control is being taken away from the teachers. They go to school, they learn what they need to learn, and they're put in a classroom, and then they're told exactly what to do, but not so much enough guidance on how to do it. Teachers want trust at the classroom level, but then also at the district level and with policy development, and they deserve that. The Jose Vilson in the guest blog makes an excellent point of treating teachers as in-house specialists. They are the specialists of the trade, and they're the ones that are not having as much of a voice and a say-so in what's happening with educational policy and what's happening with the programs that are being used in their classroom. Time is another factor that is being asked for all the time from teachers. They want time to work in their classrooms. They want time to be able to be effective and incorporate creative learning approaches in their classrooms. They also want time for planning to be able to do some of those creative lessons. And for classroom prep, I know the school that I worked at, there was only one day provided for getting the classroom ready at the beginning of the year, so teachers are spending their summertime coming in and trying to get things ready, and it still just isn't enough. And to be honest, I don't know that there would ever be enough time. I think teachers are notorious for always wanting to do more, which is not a horrible thing, but it does take a lot of time, and I don't know how easily it would be met. But one of the pieces that would be most helpful is not having a meeting unless the meeting is valuable. I think some of the screencasting is an effective way to get messages out there and to do trainings for teachers where they can use their own time when they have it to get the information that they need, as opposed to everyone having to sit through meetings every week, multiple times a week, to get information that sometimes isn't valuable. Being the example is another thing that teachers don't necessarily voice all of the time, but I think would be a very standard and effective way for a principal or an administrator to get respect from their teachers and to have their teachers feel respected. Teachers want principals to walk the walk with them, to be present, visit the classroom often, but not just for an evaluation purpose, but to really know what's going on and to be in the trenches with them. Adina Sullivan mentions admitting your wrongdoings, being an honest administrator, and setting that example for your teachers. Also knowing why they're asking for something, to really do the research and to know and to believe in the policies that they're handing down and not just do it for the sake of doing it. Empowering teachers is something that I think has really gone by the wayside, and I think it's something that administrators need to set the example for and take the lead on. They need to create opportunities for teachers to be leaders, but then value that leadership. At the school that I worked at, there were always the same people who were taking on those leadership roles, which was great, and those were people who were comfortable in those roles. But then they always got all of the additional responsibilities placed on their shoulders. So their leadership wasn't exactly being valued, it was more being taken advantage of. And when teachers feel like they're being taken advantage of, they don't feel motivated to really put their all into the leadership opportunities that they're taking on. Schools and administrators need to give up the control. The suggestion was made by Shelley Blake Pollock to get rid of the hierarchy, to not have your superintendent who's in charge of your principal, who's in charge of your classroom teacher, etc., but to really empower everybody and have everybody working together as a team. I think it's a great concept, and I think it's one that could very much be effective. And finally, the student voice was one that was only mentioned in the last blog by Shelley Blake Pollock, but it really is something that is worth mentioning because students don't really have a say-so in what's happening in the schools these days. They don't have a say-so in the school board, they don't have a say-so in faculty meetings, and in any other type of business, the customer is always right. In the educational setting, the student is the customer, and yet their voice is never one that's being listened to or put out there as far as policies and what's needed in the classroom and what will work in the classroom. I think it's important to take note of the fact that the student should be representative of all students and not just the token good students. And this leads into the textbook readings with the digital storytelling and the idea of encouraging student voice. Both of those I saw kind of going together, one more towards community engagement and one more towards student voice. But I think it was very interesting what the administrator was doing, sitting down and not just listening to the students, but videotaping it and then using it as a model for others, for their teachers, for other students, on what was needed at the school and what was going well at the school. And the administrator obviously learned a lot from that. The students learned a lot from it, and it was a very effective practice. But I think also the digital storytelling piece that has to do with the community and learning more about the community and having outside community members come in and be participants in helping to understand the school, I think was very important. My school had a 100-year celebration, and they did something similar to this, but it was all for show. It wasn't for relevance. It wasn't anything that tied the culture of the community back to the students. And I feel like that would be very valuable for students to understand what their community is like and how these technology tools and how what they're learning really applies to who they are in the community. I think as far as the NETS A Standard 2 pieces, I think this really helps to model and promote the frequent and effective use of technology for learning. I think it really sets the example for students. And the main components of the Standard 2, are providing a rigorous, relevant, and engaging education for all students. And relevant and engaging, the engaging component is related to the apps and really doing something that students can get involved in, something that they feel like is fun and interesting and worth their time. And the BYOD, the Bring Your Own Device policy, I think is fantastic, especially for the relevance component, because students, it's not just learning between the bells, it's taking it home and continuing to apply it. And as the chapter mentioned, it's not something that students are aware that they're doing necessarily. It's just something that kind of happens beyond their control because they're so in tune to their devices. So if they're using them in school and they're using them at home, sometimes those two things are going to kind of mesh together, and that's going to take their learning beyond the classroom.